Alright guys, the Championship delivered plenty of twists and turns in midweek, and we're back again to preview all the games we've got coming up this weekend. As always, I want to hear from you in the comments down below. How do you see these games going? And if you do go and enjoy, make sure to drop a like. But without any further ado, let's just jump in. So starting out with the Friday game at Turf Moor, it's Burnley going up against Norwich. Both teams coming off the back of goalless draws in midweek. Burnley could only draw with Derby. Bit of an under-par performance given what we've seen from Burnley recently, but by no means a disaster of a midweek round, especially considering that Sheffield United lost. The real strength of this Burnley side this season has been, even when they're not completely at their firing best, they do tend to draw matches instead of losing them. It's now a 28-game unbeaten streak they're on, and this feels like a decent opportunity to get back to winning ways against a Norwich side who, let's face it, haven't been brilliant on the road this season, only averaging 0.9 points per game in away matches. Now, to be fair to Norwich, I thought they were decent in midweek against Sunderland. A point against Sunderland is not to be sniffed at, and to be honest, they probably had the better chances to go on and win that game. They made a decent start in the first half. Score prediction for this game, though, I do fancy Burnley to get back to winning ways. I'm going to go 2-0 Burnley in that game. After that, we go to the first of the early kickoffs on Saturday. We're going to Ellen Road for Leeds up against Preston. Leeds getting back to winning ways in midweek, and it was a richly deserved 3 points. Probably should have been more comfortable in the end, given some of the goals they had chalked off, but 3 points all the same, and you'd have to fancy Leeds for another result in this one. It feels like a decent time to be playing Preston. We're obviously coming off the back of back-to-back draws at home against Stoke and Cardiff. Only one win in the last 10 now for Preston, and there is a bit of a frustrated feel around Deepdale at the moment, obviously after going out of the FA Cup. Not really that much on the line for North End at this point of the season in terms of the Championship. I actually thought in midweek against Cardiff, in the final third, we played pretty well. We got into quite a few decent goal scoring positions and could have very well had more than the 2 goals we scored in the end, but at the opposite end of the pitch just looks so vulnerable at times. Obviously we've got Di Cornell in there on number 2 until the end of the season now because Freddie Woodman's out injured. I have a feeling that Leeds will have their tails up after that result they got away at Borough. The home crowd's going to be roaring them on. Score prediction for this game, reluctantly, I'm going to go 3-1 Leeds. I do fancy them for a few goals in that game, I'm afraid. Next up, we go to Home Park for Plymouth up against Sheffield United, and how on earth does Sheff United bounce back from 2 consecutive 1-0 defeats? I think there were quite a few surprise Blades fans in midweek that Wilder decided to go unchanged for that game against Millwall, exactly the same starting 11 that had obviously underwhelmed at Oxford. In the end, that didn't pay off and really puts the pressure on this sort of match here. Now, there's no doubt that Sheff United are the favourites going into this one, but Plymouth, especially at home, are no complete mugs. I know they can be so erratic game week to game week, depending on which version of Plymouth actually shows up, but so far this season, among the sides they've beaten at home, you've got the likes of Norwich, Millwall, West Brom, Sunderland. They have beaten a lot of decent clubs at home this season. And when you think that Sheffield United aren't quite firing on all cylinders right now, you know, they failed to score in their last 2 games, there absolutely could be something in this game for Plymouth here. For the time being, I'm going to keep my faith in Sheffield United. They've obviously had that extra day of recovery as well. I'm going to go 2-1 Sheff United, but on the back of their last couple of results, I'm not massively confident in predicting them right now. And after that, we go to an absolutely huge game at the bottom of the Championship. It's Cardiff up against Stoke, and both sides having quite conflicting games in midweek, actually, despite both ending up drawing. It was Cardiff who scored a last-minute equaliser to get back into that game against Preston, and Stoke conceded a last-minute equaliser to surrender the 3 points against Luton. They had to settle for a point in the end. Now, me, as a North End fan, I've obviously seen both of these sides very recently over a full 90 minutes in the flesh, and on those 2 viewings, I did think that Stoke had a little bit more about them than Cardiff did, but not to underestimate Cardiff in their performance at North End in midweek. They had to come back from a goal behind twice in that game, showed a bit of attitude and desire that's perhaps not always been there this season. You know, when you're in the relegation battle and you go a goal down twice in a game, it's quite easy to go under from that point onwards, but Cardiff didn't let that happen, and a couple of the tweaks they made in the second half ultimately made the difference. Stoke didn't look brilliant in midweek, I'm not going to lie, against Luton. Obviously, very close to snatching all 3 points had they held on, but a point on the reflection of the whole game was probably about right. Both teams have been fairly draw heavy recently, and I would not be at all surprised if this one ends as another pretty unhelpful draw. Score prediction there, I'm going to go for a 1-1, which doesn't really do either of these sides any favours right now. Next up we go to another massive game at Kenilworth Road for Luton up against Blackburn. Now Blackburn finally managed to stop the losing run in midweek, coming from 2 goals behind against Sheffield Wednesday, but still winless in their last 8 championship matches, and it does feel like a decent time to be playing them. Ultimately a Blackburn side who don't really have anything to play for at this stage. Luton, they've only lost 1 of their last 7. They have been pretty draw heavy of late though, and draws won't be enough to get them out of the bottom 3, and I go as far to say that this one is looking like a bit of a must-win game for Luton this weekend. With other sides at the bottom of the championship playing each other this weekend, this is a real opportunity here for Luton to make up some ground on some of those sides, and like I say, they've been hard to beat recently, but draws won't cut it from now until the end of the season. They got back into it with a late point against Stoke in midweek. Would have been a bit of a disaster if they lost that game, to be honest with you. At Kenilworth Road, they've tended to be really competitive this season. Still feel like Blackburn are a bit of a soft touch. It has been too easy to score against them in these last few weeks, so despite how wasteful Luton tend to be, I do reckon they'll just about get the job done here. 2-1 Luton, I'm saying, in that game, but with their record in front of goal, even I'm not too confident in that. I don't think they've scored more than 1 goal in any of their last 4 games, have they? But I'll go 2-1 Luton in that game and fancy them for a win. After that, we go to an absolutely massive game at the Den for Millwall up against Middlesbrough. And Millwall, after winning their last back-to-back matches, have put themselves back into playoff contention. If they beat Middlesbrough here, they'll go level on points with them, so a massive incentive for Alex Neil's side. And credit to a few of the Millwall fans in the comments from last time's video, because there were a few of you who were fancying a bit of an upset away at Sheffield United, and in the end that's exactly what happened. Brilliant away performance from Millwall, obviously. The 1 goal was enough in the end. They took that goal really well. I think it was, even in the second half, I think it was Ivanovic who had a really good chance to put them 2 goals up. But yeah, the 1 goal was enough in the end, and it's the first time Millwall have put together back-to-back wins since the end of January. When this team does get into a little bit of a roll, a manager like Alex Neil, there definitely could be something bubbling away there for Millwall for these last few matches of the season. But yeah, absolutely massive importance on this match. Now, Borough obviously coming off the back of that loss to Leeds in midweek. Ultimately, I thought that extra bit of quality that Leeds had ultimately told in that game, obviously. A few decisions going in Middlesbrough's favour because of their offside goals and things like that. But in fairness to Borough, I thought they got in some really good positions themselves in the second half. Very well could have had a goal or 2 had they been a little bit more clinical. They're certainly no mugs at the moment. Oh, this one feels really tight, and I'm a little bit torn with how to call this one, to be honest with you. Millwall at the Den recently have been really competitive. It's only really Bristol City of late that I can remember coming away with all 3 points from Millwall. I'm going to sit on the fence though. I do fancy Borough for at least a goal in that game. 1-1 I'm saying between those 2, but if either side wins it, that's a massive step towards the top 6. After that, we go to Fratton Park for Portsmouth up against Derby. Portsmouth continuing the trend where they carry on winning at home but just can't get anything over the line away from home. They were so close to snatching a point in midweek away at Coventry, but that last minute winner from Jamie Patterson ultimately means it was another defeat on the road, and Derby can maybe sense a bit of an opportunity to catch up to Pompey here. If Derby win this game, they will go level on points with them. So a really big game with implications at the bottom of the championship. For Derby, it was a very solid point in midweek against Burnley. They've only lost 1 of their last 6. They're not losing many football matches right now, are they? Fratton Park has been a really tough place to go all season, regardless of who you are, but Derby themselves aren't giving much away to the opposition right now. I hate sitting on the fence for these sorts of matches, but we have had a lot of draws recently in similar matchups. Score prediction there, I'm going to go for a 1-1. I reckon Derby could be good for another point in that one. After that, we go to Loftus Road for QPR up against Bristol City. A much needed win for QPR in midweek. Back to business against Oxford. 3-1 in that game. It had felt in recent weeks like they were just meandering towards the end of the season, and I mean, if they lost that match, seriously could have been dragged into a relegation scrap, but those fears have been eased after that midweek performance, and be interesting to see what version of QPR shows up for this game, because they're going up against the Bristol City side, who are absolutely flying right now. Absolute scenes at Ashton Gate in midweek with that 96-minute winner against West Brom. Really puts them in a strong position to attack these final few games of the season and solidify a place in the top 6. They lost 2 of their last 14 matches now in the league, Bristol City. This one is dependent on which version of QPR shows up, really. Despite that win in midweek, I do still think I'm giving the edge here to Bristol City. Score prediction, I think it will be tight, man. I'm going to go 1-0 Bristol City on the road in that game. After that, we go to Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday up against Oxford. Wednesday had that 2-goal lead against Blackburn in midweek, but couldn't see it out. It finished 2-2 in the end. And Oxford, after coming off the high of beating Sheffield United over the weekend, couldn't follow it up with a performance in midweek. They lost against QPR, and it felt like a bit of an opportunity missed for Oxford, to be honest with you, given the form that QPR came into that game with. Now, what's interesting about this matchup here is that Sheffield Wednesday haven't won a home game since the 1st of January, and Oxford haven't won an away game in the Championship since the 1st of January. So surely something's got to give here, or are we going to see two sides cancelling each other out, with Wednesday not really having the rub of the green at home recently, and the same could be said for Oxford in some of their away matches. If there is going to be a winner, it feels like it could be decided by a 1-goal margin. Oxford have only won once on the road all season though, haven't they? I know Wednesday haven't really fared great at Hillsborough, but I'm just going to edge them and say they will get a result over the line here. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 Sheffield Wednesday in that game. After that, we go to the Stadium of Light for Sunderland up against Swansea. Be interesting to see what version of Sunderland we get from now until the end of the season, obviously with their place in the top 6 having already been confirmed. This one won't be a walk in the park against a Swansea side who have now won back-to-back matches. Totally dominant display in midweek, really brushing aside Plymouth, beating them 3-0. I don't think they'll quite have it all their own way in this game like they did in midweek. Certainly don't think they'll see as much of the ball and have as many openings on goal, especially against the Sunderland defence, who has looked pretty tight recently. I think it's now 3 consecutive clean sheets that Sunderland have kept in the Championship, obviously coming off the back of a midweeker away at Norwich where it ended goalless. Tough one to call, really, because I thought that Swansea gave a really good account of themselves recently when they travelled away to Leeds United, snatched a point in that one, which finished 2-2. With Sunderland having home advantage, though, I think I'm just going to give the edge to them. First goal in that game feels quite important. I'm going to go 1-0 Sunderland, though. They've been quite good for a 1-0er of late, haven't they? After that, we go to the Hawthorns for West Brom up against Watford. And from a West Brom perspective, it does feel like we're getting into must-win territory here. Not been a good run of form for them. It's now 3 consecutive defeats. That one in midweek against Bristol City especially feels like an absolute hammer blow. The circumstances of it with the late red card and then Bristol City winning it just a few minutes later. After 3 consecutive defeats, 3 games where they've only managed to hit the back of the net once as well, these next 2-3 matches, it feels like West Brom need to start rolling out the wins now, and draws in these next few games will not cut it if they want to finish in the top 6. Watford, to be fair, did get a good win in midweek, 1-0 against Hull. It was a lovely finish from Musa Sissoko in that one, wasn't it? But I can't see them making up the points from this point onwards to bridge that gap between themselves and the top 6. With West Brom needing to win, I'm going to say they get the job done here. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-0 West Brom. It just feels like they have to go for it. And then for our last matchup of this batch of games, we've got a Monday night kickoff. That sees Hull going up against Coventry, a really big game at both ends of the table, obviously. Both of these clubs will have maybe a little bit of added pressure going into the Monday night game, especially for Hull if other teams around the bottom of the Championship have won, or for Cardiff if their fellow promotion chasers for the top 6 have picked up results. So that's worth taking into consideration. For Coventry, it was an absolutely massive result in midweek. Jamie Patterson with a goal in the last few seconds of that game to give them all 3 points. Those extra couple of points that they picked up in the last seconds of that game could turn out to be absolutely vital come the end of the season. They're going up against a Hull side who don't tend to give much away to the opposition, but equally in the final third recently haven't been offering that much themselves. In midweek, it was a bit of an underwhelming performance away at Watford. In the final third right now, I do think Cov have a bit more about them, and for that reason, I'm just going to edge them for a 2-1 win on the road. But those are my score predictions heading into this weekend's action in the Championship, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below, so make sure to leave them down there. Other than that though, guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.